I thought I knew my wife after 23 years of marriage. Then I came home early and heard a man's voice in our bedroom. What I discovered about her secret life destroyed everything I believed about love, loyalty, and family. But that was just the beginning of a nightmare that would cost me everything I'd worked for. My name is Derek Hoffman. I'm 56 now, and this is the story of how my world fell apart and how I rebuilt it from the ground up. 12 years ago, I was 44 and thought I had everything figured out. I was a logistics manager for Henderson retail chain, overseeing supply operations for their Northeast division. The job paid well, came with decent benefits, and I was good at it. Really good. I worked my way up from warehouse supervisor over 8 years, and management had started talking about regional director positions. Veronica was 39 then, working part-time at Chloe's high school as an administrative assistant. Our daughter Chloe was 17, a senior getting ready for college, smart as a whip and determined to study journalism. Our son James was 13, just starting high school, more interested in video games than homework, but a good kid with a kind heart. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Millbrook Heights, nothing fancy but solid. I've been making payments on it for 6 years, and we were finally starting to see some equity. The neighborhood was quiet, good schools, the kind of place where kids could ride their bikes without worry. I thought we were happy. Sure, work kept me busy, and there were weeks when I'd pull 60-hour shifts during peak seasons. Inventory management doesn't sleep during the holidays, and when you're responsible for coordinating shipments across 12 states, problems don't wait for convenient times. But I figured Veronica understood that. The overtime paid for Chloe's college fund and kept us ahead of the mortgage. The first real break in my perfect world came on a Wednesday evening in March. I'd gotten home around 8, later than usual because of a shipping delay in Baltimore. Veronica was in the kitchen, but she barely looked up when I walked in. "How was your day?" I asked, loosening my tie and grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Fine," Veronica said, not turning around from the stove where she was stirring marinara sauce. "Kids get their homework done." James did. "Chloe's at the library." The conversation felt stiff, like we were strangers making small talk. I noticed it before, but chalked it up to stress. "Everything okay?" I pressed, studying her profile. "Everything's fine, Derek. Just tired." But it wasn't fine. Over the next few weeks, the distance between us grew wider. She'd go to bed earlier, claiming headaches. She'd started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. When I tried to talk about her day, her responses were clipped, distracted. The breaking point came on a Friday night in April. I decided to surprise her by coming home early. James could fend for himself, and Chloe was spending the night at a friend's house. I pulled into our driveway at 5:30 and noticed an unfamiliar silver Honda Accord parked across the street. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was in her garden, and she gave me a strange look as I walked to the front door. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. I called out Veronica's name, but got no response. Then I heard voices coming from upstairs. Low, intimate voices that made my stomach drop. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. The voices were coming from our bedroom, and one of them definitely wasn't Veronica's. When I reached the top, I could hear them clearly. Veronica was laughing, the kind of genuine laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. "Derek won't be home for hours," Veronica was saying. "He never gets home before 7 on Fridays." "Good," the man's voice replied. "Because I've been thinking about you all week, Ronnie." Ronnie. Nobody had called her that since college. I stood frozen outside our bedroom door, gripping the banister. Part of me wanted to burst through that door and confront whatever was happening. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. Through the gap in the door, I could see Veronica sitting on our bed in a blue dress I'd never seen before. Across from her sat a man in his mid-40s, stocky build, wearing jeans and flannel. He had his hand on her knee. "Dwight," Veronica said. "What if he finds out?" "He won't," Dwight replied. "Guy like that, head buried in spreadsheets, he wouldn't notice if the house was on fire." The casual cruelty hit me hard. Here was a stranger in my bedroom, dismissing me like I was nothing, and my wife was letting him. "You're right," Veronica said. "Derek lives for that job. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to Henderson Retail instead of a man." I'd heard enough. I backed away and walked downstairs quietly, my hands shaking. 23 years of marriage reduced to casual mockery in our own bedroom. I called my brother Mike from my truck. "Derek." Mike answered. "What's wrong? You sound terrible." If Sarah was cheating on you, what would you do? Long pause. Brother, what's going on? I told him everything. Mike listened without interrupting. First thing, Mike said when I finished, don't do anything stupid while you're emotional. Second, you need more evidence. That recording is a start, but document everything. Times, dates, places. What about the kids? They don't need to know yet. Not until you decide what you're going to do. But Derek, you can't pretend this isn't happening. At 6:15, Dwight emerged from my house, kissed Veronica on the front porch, and drove away in that silver Honda. I waited 10 minutes before going back inside. Veronica was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. You're home early, she said, not looking up from dinner preparation. Yeah, I replied, studying her face. Slow day at the warehouse. She just nodded and continued chopping vegetables, as calm as if she'd spent the afternoon reading instead of entertaining another man in our bed. The next week was hell. I went through the motions at work, managing shipments and coordinating deliveries, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was Veronica making plans with Dwight. Every evening when I came home, I searched for signs of his presence. Mike had given me the name of a private investigator, a guy named Tom Walsh who specialized in matrimonial cases. Tom was a former police detective, built like a linebacker, but with sharp, intelligent eyes. We met at a diner downtown on my lunch break. Your brother told me about your situation, Tom said, sliding into the booth across from me. Before we go any further, you need to understand what you're asking for. Once I start digging, there's no going back. You're going to learn things you might not want to know. I already know she's cheating, I said. I need proof that will hold up in court. Tom nodded and pulled out a notepad. Tell me about this Dwight character. Last name, where he works, what he drives. I told him everything I'd observed. Tom took notes, asking specific questions about times, locations, and patterns. Here's what I'm going to do, Tom said. I'm going to follow your wife for a week, document where she goes, who she meets, how long she stays. I'm also going to run a background check on Dwight Grimm. You might be surprised what turns up. What do you mean? Guys like this, they usually have a pattern. This probably isn't his first affair. Married men who chase other married women often have a history. 3 days later, Tom called with his preliminary findings. Dwight Grimm was 46, divorced twice, worked as a regional sales manager for a plumbing supply company. He had 2 DUI convictions and was behind on child support payments to both ex-wives. Real winner, Tom said dryly. But here's the interesting part. He's been married 3 times, not twice. His current wife doesn't know about the divorces. Filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago, but somehow managed to keep his job. Current wife? Yeah, married to a woman named Janet for 8 months. Lives in Riverside, about 20 minutes from your house. My stomach dropped. Not only was Veronica cheating on me, she was helping Dwight cheat on his new wife. The betrayal felt deeper somehow, more calculated. There's more, Tom continued. I followed your wife yesterday. She met Dwight at the Marriott on Route 9. They were there for 2 hours. I've got photos, timestamps, license plate numbers. This isn't just an emotional affair anymore, Derek. That evening, I sat in my truck outside our house for 15 minutes before going inside. Chloe was at the kitchen table working on college applications, and James was in the living room playing video games. Veronica was upstairs, claiming she had a headache. Dad, Chloe said without looking up from her laptop, is everything okay? You and Mom have been weird lately. My daughter was sharp, always had been. She could read people better than most adults. Just work stress, sweetheart, I said, hating myself for lying to her. How are the applications coming? Good. I should hear back from State University next month. I watched her work, this brilliant young woman who was about to start her own life, and felt a surge of protective anger. Whatever happened between Veronica and me, I wasn't going to let it destroy our children's futures. 2 weeks after hiring Tom Walsh, I had enough evidence to bury Veronica in divorce court. Photos, receipts, hotel records, phone logs. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt empty. 23 years of marriage reduced to a manila folder full of betrayal. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. I've been working late, genuinely this time, dealing with a massive shipment delay that had cascaded through our entire supply chain. When I got home at 9:30, the house was dark except for the television in the living room. James was asleep on the couch, still in his school clothes. Chloe's car wasn't in the driveway, and there was no sign of Veronica. I woke James gently. Hey, buddy, where's your mom? She left around 6, James said, rubbing his eyes. Said she had to run errands. Told me to order pizza for dinner. Errands at 6 p.m., that lasted until 9:30. I checked my phone. No messages from Veronica, no explanation of where she was or when she'd be back. That's when something inside me snapped. Not the explosive anger I'd expected, but something colder, more dangerous. I'd been the responsible one our entire marriage, the provider, the planner, the man who always did the right thing. And what had it gotten me? I called Mike. I need to get out of the house for a while. Can you come stay with James? Derek, it's almost 10 p.m. What's wrong? Just need some air. Please. Mike arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at my face, and didn't ask questions. Go, he said. I'll stay until you get back. I drove aimlessly for a while, eventually ending up at Riverside Casino, a place I'd been to exactly twice in my life, both times for company Christmas parties. But tonight, the bright lights and constant noise felt like exactly what I needed. I started at the blackjack table with $100, telling myself I'd play for an hour and then go home. The cards were kind to me at first, and the 100 became 300, then 500. The dealer was friendly, the drinks were free, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Veronica or Dwight or divorce papers. By midnight, I was up $800. By 2 a.m., I was down $600. By 4 a.m., I'd lost $1,500 I couldn't afford to lose, money that was supposed to go toward Chloe's college expenses. I stumbled out of the casino as the sun was rising, my mouth dry and my head pounding. Mike was waiting in my kitchen when I got home, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. Rough night, he asked without looking up. You could say that. James asked if you were okay. I told him you were dealing with some work problems. I poured myself coffee with shaking hands. Mike, I think I'm losing it. What happened? I told him about the casino, about the money I'd lost, about how good it felt to not think about my collapsing marriage for a few hours. Mike was quiet for a long time. Derek, you can't handle this alone anymore. You need to decide what you're going to do about Veronica, and you need to do it before you destroy yourself. He was right. The investigation phase was over. It was time to act. Mike was right. It was time to stop gathering evidence and start taking action. I called in sick to work on Friday morning and waited for Veronica to leave for her job at the school. Once her car disappeared down the street, I went upstairs to our bedroom and started packing her belongings. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was too hot, too unpredictable. What I felt was something colder, more purposeful. 23 years of marriage deserved better than lies and hotel room receipts. But if this was how it was going to end, then it would end on my terms. I filled 3 suitcases with her clothes, shoes, and personal items. Everything else, the furniture we'd bought together, the wedding photos, the joint bank accounts, those would be settled through lawyers. But I wanted her personal effects out of my house before we had the conversation that would end our marriage. When Veronica came home that afternoon, she found the suitcases lined up in the front hallway, and me sitting at the kitchen table with Tom Walsh's manila folders spread out in front of me. Derek, she said, her voice careful and controlled. What's all this? Sit down, Veronica. We need to talk. She remained standing, her eyes moving from the suitcases to the photos on the table. Hotel security footage showing her and Dwight entering the Marriott. Credit card receipts for romantic dinners I hadn't taken her to. Phone records showing hundreds of text messages between them. You hired someone to spy on me, she said, and there was genuine shock in her voice. I hired someone to document what you were doing while I was at work providing for our family. I replied. The spying was just a side effect of your lying. Veronica sat down slowly, her face pale. How long have you known? I caught you in our bedroom 3 weeks ago. I've known about Dwight for a month, about the hotel for 2 weeks, about his wife Janet for 10 days. That last detail hit her like a physical blow. His wife. Yeah, his wife. The woman he married 8 months ago. The woman who doesn't know she's married to a serial cheater with 2 DUI convictions and a bankruptcy filing. Veronica's composure finally shattered. Tears started running down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold determination to finish what needed to be finished. Derek, I can explain. No explanations. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your suitcases and leave. Tonight. You can stay wherever you want, with Dwight, with your sister, in a hotel. I don't care. But you're not sleeping in this house anymore. What about the kids? The kids will stay here with me. When they ask where you are, I'll tell them you needed some time to figure things out. Eventually, we'll tell them the truth, but not until after we've worked out the legal details. Veronica was crying harder now, but I pressed on. Second, you're going to call a lawyer. A good one, because I'm filing for divorce on Monday morning, and I'm asking for full custody of both children. Derek, please. Third, you're going to stay away from Chloe and James until we establish a formal visitation schedule. I won't have you disrupting their lives any more than you already have. The cruelty of my words hung in the air between us, but they needed to be said. Veronica had made her choices, and now she would live with the consequences. She looked at the evidence spread across the table one more time, then picked up her purse and car keys. I never meant for it to go this far, she said quietly. But it did, I replied. And now we both have to deal with what comes next. After Veronica left, I sat in my kitchen for an hour, staring at the evidence of my failed marriage. The house felt different without her presence, quieter, but also strangely lighter. When Chloe came home from her part-time job at the bookstore, she immediately noticed the changed atmosphere. Dad, she said, dropping her backpack by the front door, where's Mom? And why does the house feel weird? I've been dreading this conversation, but there was no point in delaying it. Chloe was 18, legally an adult, and smart enough to know something major had happened. Your mother has moved out, I said simply. We're getting divorced. Chloe sat down across from me, her face cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been relief. Because of the fighting? She asked. You noticed the fighting? Dad, I'm not blind. You and Mom have barely spoken to each other for weeks. And she's been acting strange, staying out late, taking phone calls in the other room. My daughter was more observant than I'd given her credit for. How much of our marital problems had we exposed our children to without realizing it? Your mother has been having an affair, I said, deciding that honesty was better than half-truths. I found out about it, confronted her, and asked her to leave. Chloe was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and mature. I'm sorry, Dad. That must have been really hard for you. It was. But we'll get through it. All of us. What about James? Does he know? Not yet. I'll tell him when he gets home from baseball practice. This is going to be harder for him. He's younger, and he's always been closer to your mother. When James walked through the door an hour later, dirty from practice and complaining about homework, I asked him to sit down in the living room. Chloe joined us, taking a seat next to her brother on the couch. James, I said, choosing my words carefully, your mother and I are having some serious problems in our marriage. She's moved out of the house for a while, so we can both figure out what we want to do. James looked from me to Chloe and back again. Are you getting divorced? Probably yes. Is it because of me? Because I got in trouble at school last month. The question broke my heart. No, buddy. This has nothing to do with you or Chloe. This is between your mother and me, and it's about adult problems that have nothing to do with you kids. Where is she going to live? I don't know yet, but she'll still be your mother, and you'll still see her regularly. Nothing about that is going to change. James started crying then, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that only children can produce. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his small body shake against mine. It's going to be okay, I whispered into his hair. I promise you, it's going to be okay. But as I held my son and watched my daughter try not to cry, I wondered if that promise was one I could actually keep. 3 weeks after Veronica moved out, I thought we were adjusting well to our new normal. James was seeing a counselor at school twice a week, which seemed to help with his anger and confusion. I'd rearranged my work schedule to be home when the kids got out of school, and we'd established routines that felt stable. Then Chloe got arrested. The call came 11 p.m. on a Friday night. I was reviewing divorce paperwork when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Hoffman, this is Officer Martinez with the Millbrook Heights Police Department. We have your daughter Chloe in custody. My blood went cold. Is she hurt? No, sir. She's not injured. But she's been charged with vandalism and underage drinking. You'll need to come to the station to pick her up. I found a babysitter for James and drove to the police station with my hands gripping the steering wheel. Chloe had always been the responsible one, the straight-A student who followed rules and made good decisions. This didn't make sense. Officer Martinez led me to a small room where Chloe sat at a metal table, her eyes red from crying. She looked younger than her 18 years, scared and ashamed. "Dad," she said when she saw me, "I'm so sorry." "What happened?" I asked, sitting down beside her. Officer Martinez consulted his notes. "Your daughter was with a group of teenagers who were drinking in Riverside Park. When park security approached them, they ran. During their escape, they knocked over several trash cans and broke a park bench. Security cameras caught the whole thing." "Who was she with?" "3 boys from the high school. We've contacted their parents as well." I looked at Chloe, trying to reconcile this information with the daughter I thought I knew. "Chloe, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I was just, I don't know, mad, I guess." After we completed the paperwork and drove home in silence, I made us both coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. It was nearly 1 a.m., but this conversation couldn't wait. "Talk to me," I said. "Help me understand what's going on." Chloe stared in her coffee cup. "Everything feels broken, Dad. Mom's gone. You're working all the time. James is angry constantly. And I'm supposed to go to college in 4 months and act like everything's normal. You could have talked to me about this. When? You're either at work or dealing with lawyers or trying to keep James from having a meltdown. There's no space for my problems." The accusation hit me hard because there was truth in it. I'd been so focused on managing the logistics of our new life that I'd missed the emotional toll it was taking on my daughter. "You're right," I said. "I haven't been paying enough attention to how you're handling all this. That's my fault. Those boys, the ones I was with tonight, they made me feel normal for a few hours. Like I wasn't the girl whose mom ran off with another man." "Chloe, everyone at school knows, Dad, about Mom and Dwight. Someone saw them together at a restaurant, and now it's all over social media. I can't go anywhere without people looking at me with pity or whispering behind my back." I hadn't considered how public our family crisis had become in a small town. Chloe was dealing with humiliation on top of abandonment, and I'd been oblivious to it. What can I do to help? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe this is just what our life is now. We talked until nearly 3 a.m., and by the end of it, I understood that my daughter was drowning just as much as the rest of us. The difference was that she'd been drowning quietly, trying not to add to the family's burden. The next morning, I called the school counselor and arranged for Chloe to start seeing someone. I also had a serious conversation with myself about the balance between protecting my children and preparing them for the reality we were all living with. 12 years passed like pages turning in a book I never wanted to read. The divorce was finalized after 8 months of legal battles. Veronica fought for joint custody, but settled for supervised visitation when Dwight's criminal history came to light. She remarried him anyway, against all logic and advice. I threw myself into work and fatherhood, determined to give Chloe and James the stability their mother had stolen from them. Chloe graduated high school despite the chaos of our family situation and earned a scholarship to State University. She studied journalism, just like she'd always planned, and landed a job at a regional newspaper after graduation. James struggled more. The abandonment issues led to problems with authority figures throughout high school, but he found his footing in college through athletics. He played baseball at a Division II school and graduated with a degree in sports management. 5 years after the divorce, I met Delilah Wolfe at James's college graduation. She was the assistant coach of the women's softball team, a strong, independent woman who understood that my children would always come first. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony that felt like a new beginning for all of us. By the time James turned 25, both kids had established their own lives. Chloe was married to a good man named Paul and working as an investigative reporter. James was managing a minor league baseball team in North Carolina. They visited regularly, but had their own futures to build. I thought the chapter involving Veronica was permanently closed. We'd had minimal contact over the years, birthday cards for the kids, awkward conversations at Chloe's wedding, formal notifications about address changes for legal purposes. She and Dwight had moved to Florida 3 years after our divorce, and good riddance. Then, on a Tuesday evening in September, 12 years after she'd left our family for another man, Veronica knocked on our door. I didn't recognize her immediately when I answered. The woman standing on my front porch looked older than her 51 years, thinner, with graying hair and tired eyes. When she spoke my name, her voice carried the same inflections I remembered, but weaker, more hesitant. "Derek," she said, "could I please come in? I need to talk to you." My first instinct was to refuse, to close the door and pretend this moment wasn't happening. But curiosity and perhaps some residual connection to the woman who had been my wife and the mother of my children made me step aside. Delilah was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I called out to her that we had an unexpected visitor, and she appeared in the doorway, took one look at Veronica, and understood immediately who this was. "I'll give you some privacy," Delilah said, squeezing my shoulder as she passed. "I'll be upstairs if you need me." Veronica looked around our living room, noting the changes I'd made over the years. Her eyes lingered on pictures of Chloe's wedding and James's college graduation, milestones she'd missed entirely. "You look good, Derek," she said, sitting down carefully on the edge of the couch. "Happy. What do you want, Veronica?" She took a shaky breath. "I have pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Whatever I'd expected her to say, it wasn't that. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything that had happened between us, I wouldn't wish cancer on anyone. "I need to see Chloe and James," she said, "before I die. I need to try to make things right." I stared at Veronica, sitting in my living room. This woman who had once been everything to me and was now essentially a stranger. The cancer diagnosis explained her frail appearance, but it didn't change the fundamental question of what she wanted from us after 12 years of absence. "I understand you want to see the kids," I said, "but I'm not the one you need to convince. Chloe and James are adults now. They'll make their own decisions about whether they want to see you. Will you help me contact them? I'll give you their phone numbers, but I won't advocate for you or try to influence their choices. They've built their lives without you, Veronica. They've processed your abandonment in their own ways. I know I hurt them. I know I hurt you. But I'm dying, Derek. Doesn't that count for something?" The question hung between us. Did terminal illness erase betrayal? Did approaching death grant absolution for abandoning your children? "It counts for sympathy," I said finally. "I'm genuinely sorry you're sick. But dying doesn't undo the choices you made or the damage you caused." Veronica's face crumpled. "I made terrible mistakes. The marriage was awful. He drank constantly, became violent. I tried to leave him multiple times, but I had nowhere to go. You had somewhere to go. You had a home with your children who needed their mother. I thought you all hated me. We did hate you for a while, but hatred takes too much energy to sustain. Eventually, we just moved on." I walked to the kitchen and wrote down Chloe's and James's contact information on a piece of paper. "Here," I said, handing it to her. "But understand something. If either of them decides they don't want to see you, you need to respect that decision. Don't guilt them about your diagnosis or try to manipulate them into a deathbed reconciliation." Veronica took the paper with shaking hands. "What about you? Do you forgive me?" I considered the question seriously. "I forgave you years ago, but not for your benefit. I forgave you so I could move on with my life and be a better father to our children. Forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you or want you back in our lives. Will you tell me about them? About who they became?" For the next hour, I told Veronica about Chloe's career, her marriage, her strength and resilience. I told her about James's struggles and triumphs, his athletic achievements, his good heart. I showed her photos from graduations and weddings she'd missed. She cried through most of it, mourning not just her approaching death, but all the years she'd lost with her children. When she finally left, I felt drained but oddly peaceful. The conversation had provided closure I hadn't realized I needed. 3 days later, Chloe called. She contacted me. Chloe said without preamble, "I'm not going to see her. That's your choice." She said she was sorry, that she wanted to make peace before she died. "But I don't know her peace, Dad. I needed a mother when I was 17 and dealing with everything that happened. I don't need her apologies now." James made the same decision. Both of my children had built successful lives despite their mother's abandonment, and they weren't interested in reopening old wounds. Veronica died 4 months later in a hospice facility in Florida. Delilah and I attended the funeral, not for Veronica's sake, but to represent our children who chose not to go. It was a small service with few attendees, Dwight, a handful of coworkers, some distant relatives. Looking at her casket, I felt neither satisfaction nor sorrow, just a kind of completed circle. The woman who had disrupted our lives 12 years ago was gone, and we had all survived her absence. 6 months after Veronica's death, Chloe called with news that changed everything. "Dad," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement, "Paul and I are pregnant." The joy in her voice was infectious. My daughter, who had survived abandonment and family trauma, was starting a family of her own. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Scared and excited and happy all at once." "But Dad, I want you to know something. Whatever kind of mother I become, it's because of what you taught me about commitment and showing up for the people you love." Those words meant more to me than any professional achievement or financial success I'd ever experienced. James got married 6 months later to a woman named Rebecca, who coached high school softball. Their wedding was everything Chloe's had been, filled with laughter, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them, a celebration of love that had been tested and proven strong. As I walked James down the aisle, he'd asked me to give him away since his mother wasn't there to do it. I thought about the man he'd become. The angry, confused teenager who'd struggled with abandonment issues had grown into someone who understood the value of commitment and presence. During his wedding speech, James looked directly at me and said, "My dad taught me that being a man isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and taking care of the people who depend on you." Delilah and I have been married 8 years now. She never tried to replace Veronica in my children's lives, but she became something equally valuable, a steady, supportive presence who helped all of us heal from the trauma of abandonment. We moved to a smaller house after the kids were fully independent, something that felt like ours rather than a place haunted by memories of a failed marriage. Delilah runs a youth baseball league, and I volunteer as a coordinator. We travel, we read, we enjoy the kind of peaceful partnership that I once thought was impossible. Chloe's daughter, Emma, was born on a sunny Tuesday in October. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, looking into her perfect little face, I felt a completion that had nothing to do with my past and everything to do with the future we'd all built together. The gambling problem that had consumed me during the darkest period of the divorce became a cautionary tale I shared with James when he was struggling with his own demons. Recovery isn't just about stopping destructive behavior. It's about building something better in its place. Today, at 56, I understand that families aren't defined by biology or legal documents, but by presence and commitment. Veronica gave birth to Chloe and James, but Delilah helped raise them into the adults they became. Love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about showing up consistently, day after day, year after year. The most important lesson I learned is that forgiveness is a process, not a single decision. I forgave Veronica for my own peace of mind and to model healthy emotional processing for my children. But that forgiveness didn't obligate me to welcome her back into our lives or encourage my children to do so. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt, and that's okay.